All right, I'm going to be demoing the Capstone, uh, partnered with Northwestern Mutual. We created a job hunter web application. It has three main components: a Spring backend that uses Java-defined data access objects and controllers to work with a SQL database and create an API for the other components. We have a node proxy slash server that, apart from serving the static assets for the client, it also will take in client requests, perform some data mapping, forward them to the backend, and return the response. So I'm just going to start the backend up. We used Maven for dependencies and Spring to sort of bootstrap the whole project. So we've got the backend running. I'm going to run the node server. Um, Again, this used Express node module to create an HTTP server and define the various routes for the backend. So you can see Webpack was just used to create the JavaScript bundles and compress and optimize the images and a couple other things. And now the node server is listening. So I'm just going to go ahead and connect to it. And you can see we've got the HTML file, the bundle, the vendor bundle, which includes React and Redux and things like that, which we bundle separately to avoid them having to re-download all this stuff whenever we make changes to our own app code. And the image. So this is our login page. When I click this login button, it's going to direct us to Auth0, which is a third-party authorization, authentication tool that we basically outsourced most of our uh, authentication to. So when I click on it, we're at our own subdomain of Auth0. And just to demonstrate, I'm going to sign up for an account, use some random email, some password, and sign up. When I click sign up, it's going to ask me that, or it's going to let me know that this application would like to access my profile and email. I'm going to accept, and it redirects back to our application. When we get back, our application is making a bunch of calls to load up user data. These calls are fired to the back end through the proxy and then come back here. Now these return nothing but 200s because this user doesn't have any data yet. Something that happened quickly that you didn't probably see was there's a callback page that Auth0 routes to. It happens so quickly that you really don't ever actually see it. Just wanted to be clear about that's where Auth0 returns to while we wait for the cookie that it places. If we use Chrome DevTools, we can see that it's placed a cookie in local storage, and this access token gets sent along with any requests to the backend to authorize this user to actually make those requests. So on the back end, we verify the signature that Auth0 put on this using Auth0's public key and verify that this is that user and that they can make those requests. So this is our dashboard page. The general idea of the app is that you can organize your job hunt. You can put in all sorts of information about previous employers, education, projects you've done, companies, certifications you have, different contacts, upload documents like resume, things like that, and then view it all in synthesized all this information into a visual timeline of your life, basically. So just to demonstrate, I'm going to go ahead and create something. I'll create a company. You can see once we get off the dashboard, we enter this other view. And this sidebar here is how you navigate once you're in this other view. If you go back to the dashboard, that disappears. Um, Here is the profile information. This is what I used to log out, or if I wanted to change different profile information about myself. Awesome person. When I click save, it issued a put, and that put got forwarded to the back end and returned. So all of the flow of our app is, here's the client running in the browser, makes calls to the proxy takes those calls, does some mapping, usually on the data structures that the client uses, turning it into something that the backend can consume. And the backend receives those requests, authorizes the actions they want to perform, returns the response, and that gets forwarded back through the proxy, back to the client. So I'm going to create a company. These sort of we call them entities. Basically, there was a lot of different data structures that sort of followed the same model. The user, once they're logged in, they're able to create, edit, and delete them as they'd like. So we created a wrapper component that basically takes a web form and then handles any state and API calls with some configuration and a web form that gets passed into it. So to create a company, I'll just say awesome company because I'm not creative. When I hit create, you can see that post went through to the back end and came back. Let's just for demonstration's sake, let's add a phone number. And now I'm going to turn off the back end, the Spring back end, so these calls should fail. When I click save, you can see the put that got forwarded from the proxy to the back end was not returned, so it returned a 500, which got returned to the client, and rather than just enter some unknown state, we handle that error intelligently. We bind it in the Redux store. I won't get too deep into this, but in the Redux store, which is where we have all of our data, that's handy for passing between the various pages of our app. What are we in? Companies, I believe. In the Redux store, that error got bound to that particular entity. Let it know to enter into an error state. If I click OK, it just reverts to the previous state, so you can see the phone number's gone. I'm just going to go ahead and turn this back in, back on. And one last thing I want to demonstrate, experience. This is how you create positions. Now that I've created that company, I can link it to this position, and that was made a lot easier through that Redux store. Helps us handle inter-route, inter-component state like that. So awesome company, I'm going to create awesome position, $14 to $165 an hour. That sounds about right. Enter in some dates. 2019. I'm going to create this, and that create happened just fine because our backend is up again. Now if I go to timeline, I can see I've created this awesome position. It's at awesome company. It's got my start and end pay and start and end dates. And so this is the fruit of all, apart from being able to sort of manage and have all this information readily available for either applications to jobs or government forms, whatever you need it for, it's all readily accessible. This was something that we're planning on being able to pass to employers so that they could have sort of a visual timeline of your history as an individual, and you could put in your positions, you could put in your education, you could put in your projects. So Capstone, we did a really cool thing. It was a lot of fun, and I'm just going to tie that to my awesome position. And it was this fall, something like that. Create that, and then in the timeline, that's placed right there, and you can sort of see, and it's related to the position. Again, this was made easier by Redux. So that's some of the functionality of our app. I'm going to log out and log back in with one that I populated with a little more data so you could see what that would look like. Um, you can see I've just populated some more data in here so you can have a better idea of what the timeline would look like. We're not designers. We did our best, but we think it looks pretty good. Uh, so as you come in, you can sort of see what my life has been like for the last couple years. Pretty busy. You can see some projects that I've done, create a personal website. Here's the capstone, and you can sort of see where I'm going and where I've been. So yeah, so that's our app.